Good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this tonight's virtual town hall. I'm really eager to introduce you to our fantastic panel tonight. They have a ton of great information to share. But before we begin, I want to also introduce our translator, Jordi, and provide some instructions on how to join the simultaneous Spanish translation. So, para aquellos en la audiencia que prefieron escuchar la traducción del español, por favor seleccione el icono de interpretación en el parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom and seleccione el canal español or Spanish. Okay, great. With that, let's get into the topic. Tonight's topic is really very near and dear to my heart. And advocating for older adults and the disabled community is one of my greatest passions and has been a lifetime of work for me. So whether you identify as part of those communities or if you're tuning in out of concern for a loved one who is an older adult or disabled, we'll have some great information to help you feel prepared in time of disaster and have that peace of mind in times even without disaster. It's information, and that information is power, and that's what we're about tonight. We want to empower you to feel the safest you can when we face these multiple disasters, which unfortunately we do here in our world today and in Sonoma County. The information shared tonight is not just going to be relevant to fires. It's also about floods and earthquakes and power shutoffs and any other kind of disaster we face. Even though it rained this week, thank God, which is wonderful, we must remain vigilant. It's always valuable to have a plan, no matter what the season is. So with that, we're going to get started, and we're going to go through our panelist presentations, and please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A on the Zoom. If you're watching on Facebook Live right now, you can leave a comment with your question as well. So each panelist will have about 4 or 5 minutes to speak, and then we'll have about 4 minutes for questions. And we've got a great panel tonight. We have Paul Dunaway from the Sonoma County Area on Agency, who's the director of the Adult and Aging Division, excuse me, long day. We also have Michael Humphrey, who is Sonoma County In-Home Supported Services, IHSS, Public Authority Manager. We also have Lake Cowell, who is the Disability Services and Legal Center Program Director. And then we have April Pearson also, who is the Sonoma County Paratransit Director for Volunteer and Nonprofit Leadership. So at the end of the panelists' presentations, and after the Q&A, we'll have another 30 minutes to have Q&A. So if you don't get your question in after each panelist, be sure you put it in anyway, because we'll have 30 minutes at the end to answer them. And this is what this is about. Town hall meetings are not for us to listen to ourselves. They're really about us engaging with the public and really hearing what your primary concerns are. And we can't address your concerns unless we know what they are. So thanks for tuning in, and maybe you'll tune in a little bit later on this, or maybe you'll tune in now. Either way, we're glad you're here. So with that, I'm going to start with Paul Dunaway. This is somebody who I've loved working with this last year. I haven't loved COVID, but I've loved working with Paul Dunaway. He is one of our incredible division directors. He worked for years in child welfare, and then he came over and became the director of the senior services. And he's a very quick student, and he's somebody who likes to get things done. So he's a man after my own heart, and I've really loved working with him this year on COVID in terms of assisting our seniors with our senior service providers and disabled providers as well. So here is Paul Dunaway, and he's going to have a few minutes to talk to you, and then by all means, enter questions. Paul, nice to have you here.
Yes, thank you. I had no idea I was going to get that kind of introduction. I'm afraid to say anything after that. Thank you, Supervisor Zane, for thinking of doing this and having this topic. It's near and dear to my heart. Like you said, the first rain sort of signifies the end of the fire season. So what a better time to be talking about planning for the next disaster. Most people think of disasters as fires, but you're right, Supervisor Zane. It's floods, it's earthquakes, the multiple fires that we've had. I've included the power shutoffs, the public safety power shutoffs, as a part of those disasters that we all need to be cognizant about and planning for, each one of us. So once again, my name is Paul Dunaway. I'm the director of the Area Agency on Aging, and I also am the director of the Adult and Aging Division that's within the Human Services Department. I want to talk briefly about some of the programs that we have in the Adult and Aging Division. All of them center around keeping people safe living in their place of choice, but at home primarily for as long as they can. In-home supportive services, Mike Humphrey is in the lead of that through the public authority. We attach people to work with people in their homes if they have functional needs to stay living safely at home. Another program is Adult Protective Services. We investigate allegations of abuse against adults, as well as times when people struggle to take care of their own needs, but again, to be able to stay living safely in their home. And then the third program that comes to mind about that primarily is our case management services. Those services are specifically intended to be community-based and to keep people living safely in their home as an alternative to a higher level of care that could be like a skilled nursing facility. So with all of those programs, I have a natural passion of working with people that have any sort of limitations. And that's where I'm so drawn to be talking about this as it pertains to having an emergency plan if you have any sort of limitations. But I just want to qualify one thing quickly. Everybody needs an emergency preparedness plan. Everybody. It's not just for those people who need to have any sort of special needs or assistance. Yes, people with any sort of need to think about it on a larger scale if you have any sort of issues that may be hard to get out quickly. If you have a hard time pulling that garage door cord and getting your car out, having some assistance in that regard is important. Think about the numerous type of events that may happen. If you need to evacuate to a further distance, having alternative places to go, multiple alternative places to go is so important. If you have to shelter in your house, how long can you sustain without having the power on? We've become a bit accustomed to PG&E turning the power off during the summertime, but what happens if the power goes out in the middle of winter for weeks at a time? I don't say this to scare everybody, and I don't think that we should necessarily have to plan for every type of event under the sun. However, having a few plans that involve leaving the area and sheltering in place are so important for everybody. I also have to say this. In my experience working in this division and the multiple events that we've had, it continues to surprise me, and which is why I'm so glad to be talking about this, is not everybody is prepared. When we call people to check on their plans, I'm still surprised that people haven't taken the time to plan through everything that they need. And it is so important. I'm just going to keep saying it. It's so important to have an individualized plan for your individualized needs. So before I forget this one piece, and I may come back to it a couple of times, is the call to action that I have for anybody listening are three things. You need to have your own emergency plan that's individualized for your needs. So be thinking about, take a personal inventory about what your individual needs are. And I'm not just talking about the obvious things that if you're bound to a wheelchair, you need to have those types of things accessible to you, but who you have around you. And if you need help getting out in certain circumstances, you need to be sure to have a person who can help you and backup plans if that person can't get to you. So having your plan is my first call to action. The second one is if you are already responsible for somebody else, please be sure that you and that person know exactly what those plans are in case of an emergency. The third call to action is be that person for somebody else. Not everybody is going to reach out and ask for help when they need to, but I'll bet you most of you know in your own communities that one neighbor or that one person who may have some limitations and may not have the strength to reach out when they are in need. So be that person for somebody else. That's it. I'm open to any questions somebody may have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm going to repeat that. Emergency plan. If you're a caregiver, know what that plan is. And the third one is, Paul?
Be that plan for somebody.
Be that plan for somebody. And that's great because a lot of us have elderly or sometimes or disabled neighbors, and they need our support and our help. Okay, some questions that we might have. I also failed to neglect introducing our American Sign Language interpreter, Naomi Lacrosse. And it's always a pleasure to have you here, Naomi. So we have 3 languages going on right now. Thank you. Okay, the dog is right on time too. Is she barking? I hope you guys don't hear her. So the first question I have for you, Paul, is I normally get Meals on Wheels to my house. If I'm evacuated, can these meals come to a motel?
Yes, they can. If they can't be arranged through the normal system and you're evacuated, you can reach out and find out where other meals can come from. When we had evacuations, particularly, well, in both, in the Wallbridge fire and in the Glass fire, people were in hotels and arrangements were made with different organizations to get meals delivered to you.
That's great. And then and then we got this from Facebook. What are we doing to help the homeless and houseless people?
Well, that's a good question. We try to do as much outreach as we can for people living without a house. I would definitely consider that a limitation, and having a plan for when you're living on the streets of where to go. Certainly during our disasters, the Human Services Department is responsible for sheltering, and prior disaster homeless come to shelters. And we try to strategize with them permanent options for them to be housed. But certainly they're in our minds when we have to plan for disasters.
I might also add that the County of Sonoma is housing older adults who have been homeless in various sites since the very beginning of COVID. And so we are at multiple sites that people have housing, such as the Astra Hotel, or the camps out in West County. Some are still at Sonoma State. So we've taken special measures to reach out to those people who are over the age of 60 or disabled and need housing during COVID. Another question is, in my original evacuation plan, I plan to stay with it. I'm fearful of those close quarters with family and also the communal shelters. Where can I evacuate to that is most safe?
Shirley, you froze on my screen. Can I ask you to repeat it?
Oh yeah, sorry. So in the original evacuation plan, I plan to stay in San Francisco in case of an emergency, but I'm fearful of those close quarters with family amidst COVID. Where can I evacuate to that is most safe?
That's a very good question. We need to think about the multiple disasters. And this year we had perhaps the perfect storm having to evacuate during COVID. So that's what I meant by having multiple contingency plans. If one plan is with friends or family, think about other family that may be safer to live with, fewer people in the home. Certainly Hotels is another option that you can stay just yourself, sheltered. There are options if you don't have a resource to be just by yourself. I just heard something today, actually, that if one person wears a mask inside of a house, it reduces the chance of COVID spreading by 75% within that household. Pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that is pretty amazing. And we know that the governor issued some emergency plans tonight, given that COVID is spiking over the holidays. And that includes a curfew from 10 o'clock p.m. to 5 a.m. So that's important to look at that. Here's another one. In the glass fire, I was unable to reach my grandfather, who evacuated to a shelter to that he was safe. Can die. What are some strategies to ensure that this stressful situation doesn't happen for other families?
Supervisor Zane, you froze on me one more time. Am I the only one seeing that?
No, I also got it.
Other people are seeing that? Yeah, all right, sorry, I've had some bad reception today. If I continue to freeze up, I'm gonna maybe pass it over to Tracy, my assistant, to go ahead and jump in here for me. So the question was, in the glass fire, I was unable to reach my grandfather, who evacuated to a shelter because he wanted to confirm with us he was safe. But a lot of people don't have cell phones. And as we know, cell phones can die with batteries. Technology is not perfect. What can I do when, and what are some strategies that we know this happens to other families?
I think that's a great question, and I have multiple answers to that. First of all, technology is the way of our current way of living. Everybody needs to be connected to technology as much as we can. Cell phones should be in everybody's hand for the purpose of evacuations or disasters. Having batteries charged all the time and having battery backups that are mobile, that people can plug into, not dependent on a wall like I have in my office right now, but having those systems available. The other thing that comes to mind is many people share their living will with friends and family, so they know what's in that will during times that they can't communicate it. This is a great opportunity to also share your emergency plans with loved ones, with close family or friends. Let them know where you're going to be evacuating to. We saw this during our shelters, actually, when Supervisor Zane and I were touring the shelters. There was somebody who was separated from their provider, and we didn't have a way immediately. It took some time to connect the two together. But for people to share their emergency plans with loved ones so they know where they're going to be evacuating to or what their plan is during a disaster.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Paul. We're going to go ahead and now and move on to Michael Humphrey. And Michael has been the in-home support services public authority manager for many years. And matter of fact, going back to my days when I was at Council on Aging and the director there for 10 years, I worked with Michael. So it's been fun to work with you for so many years, first in my capacity at the Council on Aging and now as a county supervisor. And Michael is really the expert in these areas. And so we're going to turn it over to him now to talk to us a little bit more about how to evacuate.
Thank you, Shirley, appreciate it. Thank you, Shirley. Again, my name is Mike Humphrey. I'm the manager with the IHSS Public Authority, which operates within the County Human Services Department. I also serve as the chair of the Sonoma County Access and Functional Needs Committee. Certainly glad to be here this evening to share with the community some of the resources that are available to people with disabilities and older adults during times of emergencies. First, I want to talk a little bit about the IHSS program. The IHSS program provides assistance to over 6,000 low-income people with disabilities and older adults in Sonoma County. And for IHSS clients who have difficulty finding a care provider, the IHSS Public Authority maintains a registry of care providers for referral. The registry also maintains a program referred to as the Urgent Substitute Provider Program, and clients who have an unexpected absence of their regular caregiver can request a substitute care provider. And the one thing I want to emphasize here is with the, as Shirley mentioned, the recent uptick in the COVID cases nationally, I want to make sure that IHSS clients and providers are aware that the IHSS Public Authority has masks and gloves available. And to access them, you need to send an email to the Public Authority, and the email address, and if someone can put this in the chat, I would appreciate it. IHSS-PA@scHSD.org. So masks and gloves, if people on the IHSS program need those, we can make those available. And then finally, I wanted to share about the IHSS program. A few weeks ago, the Board of Supervisors approved a wage increase for the IHSS providers, and effective January 1, 2021, the wage will increase from the current $13 an hour to $15 an hour. So thank you, Shirley Zane, and the rest of the board. So now I'm going to jump to the emergency planning and preparedness and response. As I mentioned, we have an access and functional needs committee that meets quarterly, and I've been chairing that committee for the past 3 years. The committee includes representatives from several disability and senior organizations, as well as county and city departments. Lake is one of the speakers tonight, and she's been a long-term member of that committee, and April, who's also a speaker tonight, is one of our more recent members. So the committee, one of the important pieces of the AFN committee is our collaboration with each other. I'd like to just share a couple of examples to kind of illustrate some of that collaboration. And so during emergency events, I work in the EOC as the AFN coordinator. And so last year during one of the PG&E power outages, I received a call from my office concerning a 77-year-old lady who had very little food. Her car was parked in the garage. The garage had an electric door with no battery backup. Her electricity was scheduled to go off in 4 hours. I connected with Lake, and she said she and one of our social workers met at the lady's house. Lake brought the Yeti generator, and the social worker brought the food, and kind of connected the two of them connected and got the lady situated. And so that's kind of one example of a collaboration that really is important. I mean, these connections really help out. Another quick one, I got a call from April during the Walbridge fires. She informed me that the sheriff called asking for Paratransit to pick up an IHSS client who lived in a mandatory evacuation area out in Monterey. April was looking for help on where to take the lady. The lady didn't know where to go. I reached out to Red Cross, and we were successful in getting a room at the Doubletree Hotel. So just April and I worked on a few other situations similar to that. So those are some of the things that we can do and will continue to do. One of the other significant accomplishments of the committee is the creation of what's called the Functional Assessment Service Team. And the functional assessment service team, referred to as FAST, will go into shelters and provide assistance to people with disabilities and older adults. And we had last year during the Kincaid fire, we had the FAST team put in over 700 hours of work providing assistance to people with disabilities and older adults. And that included things like helping people get their wheelchair or canes or walkers, prescription pickup, those kinds of things. And the FAST team has been pretty active over the last couple of years, and working and become experts actually at what they do. Working in the Kincaid fire last year, and the flood of 2019, and the more recent Walbridge and glass fires as well. So we're really happy to have a strong FAST team. So there's many other accomplishments that we've had over the last few years, and I'd be glad to share more of those. But I'll, at this point, take a few minutes and open it up for questions.
Thanks, Mike. Great information. One of the questions we've had a lot, which has to do with medical equipment during a public safety power shutoff. Sorry. Hey. This is the perils of working at home. So I'm gonna throw that question out and go grab the dog. So the question is, people who have medical equipment at home that require electricity, what happens to them, and how can they get those services when a public safety power shutoff happens? And I say public safety, but they're not always about public safety. So I'm just trying to be politically correct right now, because none of us are super happy about the power shutoffs, but we also want to prevent fires too. So could you answer that question, Mike, about the medical equipment?
Sure, I'll do my best. I don't want to steal Lake's thunder, though. She's the one that probably be best for this question. But what we're looking at is really for people with disabilities, older adults who experience a power shutoff, is the really big problem is that they don't have any power to operate equipment like their battery chargers for their wheelchairs or any other equipment that they may have. A lot of people use what's called CPAPs or BiPAPs, for sleeping at night. And so all of a sudden you don't have those equipments, those things that you need to survive. And some people, particularly if it's a cold night, people are very sensitive to temperatures, those kinds of things. So that's really the biggest issue. And what the only thing that we have in place thus far, and this issue is being worked on by many different organizations, but currently we have Lakes Group Disability Services and Legal Center, who has some portable power generators that are available, and there's a process to be able to access those, but you need to kind of get signed up, and I think she'll explain that process. But the challenge is when you're in the middle of an event, getting that equipment to the people that are most immediately in need, those people that are experiencing what we've described earlier. And so this issue, I was on a phone call earlier this week with another organization who's actually putting a bunch of time and effort into trying to resolve and provide different options on how to deal with this kind of power shortage problem when the electricity goes out. So there's a lot of work being done on this front, and hopefully some solutions in the near future.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for mentioning about the new contract we have with our IHSS providers. We're always facing a shortage of IHSS providers, and it's very rewarding work. And so we encourage people to apply. Paul Dunaway has put the website into the chat if anybody wants to click on that and get more information. And thanks, PG&E does have a responsibility to locate and know where people are that have that medical equipment and notify them. But please be in touch with us, also with Mike Humphrey's office and with the county whenever you need help navigating communications with PG&E too, because we're also there for that. Did you have anything else to say, Mike, about the equipment? Because it just really remains a challenge for us.
Yeah, just a quick note that if you do have any kind of life-saving equipment in your home that that you require, you should sign up with PG&E with the medical baseline program, and I think you can just find that resource online on the PG&E website or call their office. But there's a form that you have to complete. I think that used to require a doctor's signature, but I think they've eliminated that requirement to make it easier. But if you are on that list, then you do at least get phone calls that the power outage is on its way, and they'll continue to make those phone calls up until the time of the power outage. So it is important to get signed up with that program.
That's great information. We always encourage people to duplicate, to have as many different mechanisms of receiving notices during disaster. That's really, really important. And to get on their medical baseline list is super important for people who rely upon that equipment. I can honestly say, as somebody who was the chair of the board 3 years ago during the Tubbs and Nuns fire, we've come a long way on these matters. We've been doing this more times than we wish to admit, with 4 major wildfires since 2017. And we are getting much better at this. Unfortunately, we still have these wildfires, but again, thank God for the rain. And also, thank you for having such a wonderful staff and also service providers that have really come together to work on these really tough issues. So with that, and thanks for talking about Lake and her incredible work there at Disability Services and the Legal Center. That's always a mouthful, Lake. I hate using acronyms, so I'm going to say the whole thing. But we're really pleased to have Lake here with us tonight. She is the program director and a real expert on a lot of these services. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Supervisor Zane. As she mentioned, we are Disability Services and Legal Center. I kind of want to touch on a little bit of what we do. We provide services for Napa, Lake, and Mendocino counties as well. And some of our services, we offer benefits counseling. That's have anything to do with your Social Security, any of that kind of stuff. Our legal department specializes in Social Security appeals, denials, any issues related to disability. We have housing assistance. We have a home access modification coordinator. This program helps provide for those income qualified with ingress, egress, ramps, lifts, grab bars in the bathroom. We have assistive technology help. So that's say you're looking for a scooter or a cane or a shower bench, insurance isn't going to pay for it. It's a little costly for you. We can help you kind of research and find some great freebies. We have a Native American independent living demonstration project. So this has provided us with a Native American outreach worker that has been a liaison with us and the tribal community. We have a CalFresh coordinator, and we're just general resources for anything. So this whole topic is, I'm very passionate about this. Disasters and having a plan, you're gonna hear that, if you've heard it a bit already. In terms of disasters, we have a couple specific programs. One is the PG&E program. It's Disability Disaster Access Resource Center. So this is specifically for PSPS events. So, Mike touched on this a little bit. If you have any kind of medical equipment in the home that you need to keep going to keep you safe, then we can, if you are on, you have to sign up as a PG&E medical line, and you have to be in that PG&E's zone that's going to be shut down. then we can do a Yeti battery backup for you. And this is loaned out for the entire season. So we start kind of, in the summer, and then we start getting them around at the end of December, January. And this is going to keep you in your home safe for that power outage time. We can also, so some people, their equipment's too much, this battery is not going to power all of their things. We can get a hotel for them. So we can put them in a hotel. We can provide transportation to get them there. We can provide vouchers for food. So there's quite a few things with this PSPS we can have. And we've gotten, we're a great resource for if you maybe kind of fit in between there's some kind of an oddball, please reach out. There's been some other situations that we've been able to kind of disperse. Red Cross has been great too. I think Mike mentioned them for another resource. So another disaster, which would be this COVID. We have the Dslc CARES program. So for those applicable, so we have the ability to provide financial assistance for those who have lost funds as a direct result of COVID. So this could be, someone on Social Security had a part-time job. That part-time job was stopped because of the pandemic, and now they're backed up on their bills. We can come in and help pay for it. The money does not go to the person, it goes to vendors. And it could be maybe you have to stay home and provide extra childcare, your child can't go to school. Anything like that, we might be able to assist you with. And I am going to put a little link at the bottom to contact us for that. So most importantly is we do a disability preparedness workshop. We do this twice a month. And this is on Zoom. We can do it as a one-on-one on the phone if you don't have Zoom. But just the importance of having a plan, like everyone's kind of talked, it's so important. And I know it can seem so overwhelming. There's where do you start? It's expensive. I need all these things for my grab bag. We can really help you break that down. We have checklists. It's one thing at a time. We can work with you. We can create like a plan where we check in. We'll call you in a couple months. Hey, how does it go? Where are you with your plan? Sometimes people have a hard time connecting with neighbors or asking for help. And we can also assist with that, kind of come up with, let's write them a letter or how you can go about doing that. Because the community support, all of us working together, these partnerships, that's what it's all about. And if you can connect with your neighbors, you can connect with people, that's what's going to keep us safe. Let me see. So I think, yes, that's kind of my overview. And I just want to stress the importance of making a plan, definitely making a plan. So I will provide our contact information, and please, if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Well, I think I keep hearing that same mantra over and over again. Make a plan, make a plan, make a plan. Here's a question for you, Lake. What are the best alert and warning options for those who are blind, deaf, or hard of hearing?
So that is kind of a tough one. We've done a lot of neighbor connection, having people know their neighbors. We did have a situation very similar to this. We had a couple who were deaf and they had no idea. Everyone started evacuating and they had no idea what was happening. So that's kind of building that relationship with the people around you and the importance of that. I think Paul touched on that as well, about making that connection. If there's a vulnerable person in your neighborhood, maybe reaching out. So we can definitely help them come up with some ideas and some plans to have.
That's great.
Shirley, can I jump in on that one?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say, first of all, that signing up with as many different alert systems as possible is probably your best solution. But also the county and the city of Santa Rosa just was awarded a grant, and they're in the process of getting some supplies that will include NOAA radio systems, NOAA national something weather, they're called weather radios. And so that's another alert system. And so the city of Santa Rosa is purchasing the radios, and the county purchased what's called the kind of the accessories to those radios, and the accessories include a bed shaker and an actual visual alerts that are strobe lights, and those are to create access for the deaf. And so those will be coming out probably shortly after the first of the year, somewhere around there. So so that's a resource that's going to be available for the community at large, and specifically for the deaf community as well.
And that's great. So what if I wanted to have access to one of those? How would I get that information?
You know, I don't think they have a plan yet as far as how they're going to do that, but I know the city of Santa Rosa is going to put together some materials, some outreach materials to
Okay.
begin to share that.
And we're going to get some, so you can attend our disaster preparedness Zoom. That's a little carrot. We're trying to provide those to as many people as possible.
Well, do you have those on a regular day of the month, Lake? Because that's great that you offer these.
It's every other week. And again, I'd have to, if you call the number that I posted, we have all of that, or email me. I can give anyone any information that they need.
And Lake made a good point that the city and the county are looking to disseminate those through nonprofit organizations, and the one nonprofit, DeCara, is going to be part of that distribution for the deaf. So there's already been some of those connections made, and so that's one of the primary ways to get it out there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Let's see, I think I have a couple other questions for you, Lake, also. Somebody wanted to know if it's a good practice to always evacuate when under an evacuation warning, even if you haven't received that order yet.
So I think, Michael, we have talked about this a bit. I know, you know, we've kind of talked, if you're uncomfortable, because you hear two different things. You hear, don't evacuate until we tell you to evacuate. We don't want everyone on the road. But if you have AFN, access or functional needs, and you're uncomfortable, get out, you know, evacuate if you have a plan. Am I right on this, Michael? I think we've kind of talked about.
Yeah, put me on the spot there. No, but I would say that, you know, if you don't have your plan in place, you'll definitely want to put that plan in place when the warning comes out, and make sure that you reach out to whoever it is, wherever you're planning to go, to make sure that they're available to receive you. And, you know, call Paratransit and make sure that they're available to pick you up and get you there. And so just make sure, if you're going to stay there for any length of time, that you have all those things covered, so that when it does turn into a mandatory, that, you know, you can quickly get out of there.
And I think generally, thanks, that's a good question. I think generally our emergency services department, and I know we have Nancy Brown, who's with us tonight from emergency services department. I think generally that department says that if you are older, you're a senior, and you are mobility challenged, or you have another disability, it's going to take you longer to evacuate. And it's true that roads and highways get very much tangled up in terms of a large scale evacuation. So go ahead and evacuate when you do get that warning, so you give yourself that extra time, because there is a lot of anxiety that goes on with those evacuations. So you want to minimize and mitigate that anxiety as best you can.
Yeah.
And I think you hit on it, Supervisor Zane, because that is kind of what we talked. If it's someone's anxiety level, I have friends that when it's even possibly happening, they're going to go. They just, don't, you know, their mobility issues, and they just want to go. So it's really comfort level, you know. But again, if you have your plan in place, like Michael said, make sure everything is in place, it's all prepped and ready, and then when you feel it's time.
And a lot of people have therapy pets too, therapy dogs, and that's going to take a little extra time also if you're evacuating a pet with yourself. So be ready with that pet in terms of the crate, and putting extra feed or vitamins or pills or whatever your pet uses, or toys in your vehicle. just, thinking ahead to, okay, so if suddenly I had to evacuate tonight, would I be ready? I want to add too that while we often think about fires and the power shutoffs, we have to also remember that we have had more floods here than any other about area in the country in terms of declared emergency disasters. And we had a flood this last year or the year before that was pretty atrocious. It basically surrounded Guerneville with water and made it into an island. So when the rains do hit, we have a different type often of disaster. And so if you live out in the river area, it's also, you get a little bit more notice because we know when the storms are going to come prior to the wildfires as much, but you also have to be equally ready if you live in a flood zone, which a lot of us do.
And thank you for bringing that up, Supervisor Zane. All your pets should have a plan as well. All your pets should have their emergency case and all of their food in it. And that's something we talk about in our disaster workshop as well, is having that ready for your pet as well.
And that's
too. I want to bring up earthquakes. We need to start. I know people said, oh, don't even go there, but that's where things may be disrupted, the water, everything. That's when your shelter in place plan really comes into play. Make sure you have your backup food, your backup water, all of that.
Well, what if you live in an apartment, which a lot of people do? Does the landlord have that information, or how do you get that information if you live in an apartment where you rent?
I'm sorry.
So somebody said they were concerned about the safety of their apartment in an earthquake. And how do they find out what the information is regarding the safety of that apartment in an earthquake? Should the landlord have that information?
Oh, you mean if the building itself is?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I would assume that they should know if they're earthquake, or okayed for an earthquake. I'm not really sure. That's a good question.
I think a lot of it has to do when the apartment was built, because after a certain year, and I don't know if anybody on the call, here's a pop quiz question, knows what year that was, but all new building was required to be earthquake retrograde. So in terms of the foundation. So if anybody can answer that question before the end of our town hall meeting, I'll have a little surprise for you. I'll give you my dog. So yeah.
No.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to April. But actually, before we move on to April, since a lot of people have questions that go past this town hall meeting, I wanted Paul Dunaway to mention the phone number for the information and assistance line at the county, which is a 5 days a week. But if you're a senior or disabled and you just need like case management information and assistance, this is the line to call. So could you mention that, Paul, and we'll put it in the chat also.
You bet. I'm very proud of this phone line, 565-4636, which on your phone is 565-INFO, and it's designed to take calls from social workers, very skilled social workers on the other end of the line, to talk about anything related to aging that you may have questions for. So if it's about IHSS, if it's about adult protective services, which is a different phone line, but anything related to aging, case management, etc. Since I have the floor, I'm also going to put in, you've probably seen SoCo Emergency advertised all over the county. That is a wonderful resource of vetted information about how to create plans for emergencies. It also has information in there during disasters that the county has had, with maps and zones that have been evacuated or are under warnings. I'll put that into the chat too. And then I think that Nancy's going to be putting it onto the Facebook section.
And then could you also maybe, Paul, add the Sonoma County mental health warm line? The mental health warm line is actually 7 days a week. And a lot of people, now that we're going through our 9th month of COVID and past another 3 wildfires, are really feeling the stress and the anxiety of some of these disasters. So If you need to talk to a live therapist, we have a mental health warm line 7 days a week from 10 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. And they can also refer you to other therapists or other services to call. But if you just want to talk to somebody, please call them by all means. And Paul's going to put that in the chat. And could you mention it out loud also, Paul? I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Or Tracy, you should have it. Right?
I have it. I beat Tracy. That is 707-565-2652, and I will add that right now.
That's great. And that is the mental health warm line for mental health issues. Okay. A lot of us are worried about transportation and how to get out and need that accessibility in terms of paratransit. So April Pearson is here tonight, and she runs the Sonoma County Paratransit Services, which is out of the Center for Volunteer and Nonprofit Leadership. So we're so happy to have you, April, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Again, hello, my name is April Pearson. I'm the director of Sonoma County Paratransit / Volunteer Wheels. As everybody else, I'm going to kind of go over our safety plan as well. We've been through some hard times in the last few years between fires, floods, and a pandemic. Most people always say that it won't happen to me, and we did not create a plan in case the next time it does happen to you. I've spoken to several people who also say that I will be okay, no worries. Even if you think it will never happen to you, it will be a good idea to come up with a safety plan with family, not just for your own peace of mind, but for your relatives or friends as well. If they know you have a plan, they will not have to worry so much about you. If you live alone and your phone goes out, are you able to get a ride with your neighbor to get to safety? Do your relatives have the neighbor's phone number as well to make sure you are safe? If you are able to drive, do you have enough gas in your car? Are you able to get your vehicle out? These small ideas, we don't always think ahead of time. How do you make a plan? There are so many resources, as several people have spoke about, that to make sure that you can have a plan during the disaster. The hard part is if you've gone through all the steps to have a plan and they fall through, you've checked all your boxes, packed your to-go bag, make sure you have your medication, first aid, food, water, double checked all of your lists. What do you do next? Who do you call? I know public transportation is not your first alternative, but I do want to know that we are here in case that is your option. During the glass fire, we worked closely with the Sheriff's Department and Mike Humphrey to evacuate people from their homes. We got asked on a regular basis, what if it's 2 a.m.? Will we still be able to get out? The answer is yes. The first morning, myself, a small team, were here at midnight starting to do evacuations as soon as we got the call we were needed. One of my drivers went to pick up a lady. She had never ridden public transportation and was worried about leaving her home. The driver took the time to reassure her that she would be okay, and she was very grateful that we were able to pick her up and where she needed to go. We got her to the hotel. She kept raving on how nice it was and so thankful that she got out safely. We want to make sure you're all safe as well. If you do ride transportation during a disaster, please make sure you have everything you're going to take ready to go when the driver arrives. Also have a plan. Where do you want to go, whether it's a friend's house, shelter, or a motel, with the address if you know it, so the driver is able to take you there. They want to make sure you and anyone else who needs to get out as quickly and safely as possible is able to do that. During the pandemic, we all had to change the way we do things, from how we communicate with others to how we even leave our house. Everything we have always done was not possible anymore. If we needed to leave the house, we had to double check we have masks, sanitizers. We're no longer able to gather in large groups, which is hard for a lot of the population. There are people in senior living or care homes who were no longer able to leave their residence or see their families. When it comes to transportation, we had to change our ways where we are no longer able to pick up large groups of people. We had to minimize how many people are on our buses and still make sure everyone gets there where they need to go safely. All team members have their masks and are sanitizing the bus in between every single client to make sure you are as safe as possible. We're making sure social distancing are utilized on the bus at this time. We also are not collecting fares to make sure the minimize of contact between the clients and staff are safe. As Lake kind of talked about a little bit, during an earthquake, if you happen to be on public transportation, you want to, or even in your personal car, you want to make sure you pull over safely if you're during an earthquake. You also want to make sure you're not blocking the roadways. You want to make sure if you are in your vehicle, you're going to sit in a crouch position and protect yourself from falling debris. If you're on public transportation, you want to make sure you stay on your seat and until instructed by the driver, so everybody can make sure they're safe. I do want to add with Mike and Lake, I've worked with them a few times, and how much all of us have been working really hard to collaborate on changing the way transportation and all of our ways of doing disaster, being able to help each other out a lot more than it has been done in the past. And there are a lot of other agencies we've all been collaborating with since COVID started. Actually, it started before that, to try to change the way transportation is viewed and how all of our agencies are viewed to work together.
That's great, April. What's your phone number for Sonoma County Paratransit?
It's 573-3377.
Say that again, and we'll put it in the chat also.
573-3377.
And what if I think that I might qualify for paratransit, but I'm not sure? What do I do?
So you would call Sonoma County Transit. It depends on where you live, honestly. So if you're going to ride Sonoma County Transit, which we cover all of Sonoma County except Santa Rosa and Petaluma for the application process. If anywhere other in the county, it's us. So you would call down to 585-7516, and they would send you an application, and then you would fill out the paperwork and get qualified. But they can answer any of those questions to make sure that you could ride our service.
So if I live in the cities of Petaluma or Santa Rosa, do I call the city for that application?
You call Santa Rosa Paratransit and then Petaluma. Mm-hmm.
Okay, they have their own.
Yeah.
What if one of our listeners wants to sign up to be a volunteer driver? How?
She froze, right? Okay. I think she's asking, I didn't see it, but if they want to be a volunteer driver, they would just call the 573-3377 or and ask for me, and we'd get in an application and start the training process.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. I found that in the evacuation centers during the Kincaid fire, that we had a lot of people who were evacuated and dropped off by paratransit, but when it was time for them to go home, they couldn't figure out what to do. So you're dropped off at evacuation center, you need to get home. What do you do?
You just call us directly. I know some have you go back through the EOC because they want to see who's gone back, but we have been working on actually reporting back to them in case somebody calls us directly. If you call us directly, let us know that you've been evacuated. We'll come to the shelter, pick you up, and take you home.
Okay. And just because I want everybody to know what we're talking about when we use acronyms, the EOC Sorry. is the I'm asking you.
Lake, it's Emergency
Operations Center.
Operations Center. I was gonna say, I want to make sure.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. Oh no. I hate acronyms, and I know most people do. I like to always make sure we spell things out so people know what we're talking about. So thank you for that. Paratransit is so important especially for our disabled community, and a lot more people qualify than actually realize it. Yes. So I would encourage people to check that out, to call and ask for an application and see if you qualify, because it definitely makes life easier if you are signed up for paratransit and you qualify.
Well, and also one off of that, Shirley, sorry. I recommend a lot of times, even if you don't think you're going to use it right away, to have that application put in, because it takes 21 days to get approved. and you're good for 3 years on that service. So, and then they'll send out a renewal to see if you're still wanting to use paratransit. But what if something happens that all of a sudden your friend or somebody can't take you? At least you have paratransit as a backup to be able to get you to where you need to go.
So one of our listeners asks, would an elderly person who cannot drive, would they call 911 for an emergency evacuation, or would they call paratransit directly?
Well, it's been different every time. So the glass fire, we were recommending people to call the sheriff's department, because then the sheriff's department would call us directly, and they were set up for that. So the sheriff's department had my phone number, had Sonoma County Transit, all the transportation agencies, to be able to help them out right away.
Yeah, and generally we don't like people to clog up the 911 calls lines if not necessary. If necessary, absolutely. But we do have another line that we provide information. And Paul, I think that's around the clock, isn't it? The 211 line?
Yes, it is.
It's around that's what I thought. And it also serves people in multiple different languages. So if you just need some information, you can call 211, and that's for non-emergencies. I think we are done with our panelists, but we are not done with our questions. So I'm going to throw out a few questions for some of you to answer, and feel free to jump in there and answer. Lake said that they have a disaster training or evacuation training for people who are disabled. And I wonder if there's any other types of trainings out there in terms of senior centers, and we know they're closed down right now, but a lot of them are operating remotely. Are there any other trainings out there?
So are we talking about like disaster? There's a lot of disaster planning happening through the senior centers, AAA. And again, 211 is a good one to call and ask about that as well. But yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, every time I jump into a different committee, they're doing something too. So there is quite a few things out there.
Okay, great. Before I jump into a few other questions, I just wanted to open it up to the whole panel to see what else would you like to offer that you didn't have a chance to offer yet?
What would we like to?
Yeah, what else would you like to say that you haven't had a chance to say yet?
Make your plan, call us, come do the disaster preparedness. It's, it's an ongoing process. It's not going to happen overnight. The winter is the perfect time to do it. Make your big list. Every time to the grocery store, you'll get one extra can of beans or one extra, you just start piecing it out.
That's right. You don't have to do it all in a day or even a week. It's a little bit at a time, and that's a good way to approach it. If you do live in the flood zone, though, you got to make it right now, because when the winter comes, and we were severely flooded in early March too, I might add. So you never know when those rains hit. What about the rest of you? Mike, was there something else that you'd like to add that you haven't had a chance yet to add?
Well, just that I was on mute there for a few minutes and I was talking away, but I also do some access and functional needs trainings for people who are interested in learning more about different, different pieces of how to work with people with disabilities and older adults. And so they can contact me through my office. So anyways, that's another piece that's available. But I want to emphasize too that, we have been doing this quite a bit in terms of not by choice, but by
necessity.
Yeah. And so, each time we, do one of these events, it's we get better at it. And, I want to say getting close to being experts at it, but certainly compared to some of my other colleagues around the state, we're way ahead of the game
Yeah.
with regard to how we're responding and supporting our community with regard to our response. So I'm really proud of where we've come over the last couple of years, few years. And so, and it's all, the biggest part of it is just the community coming together and really, working with each other and trying to, with the common goal to, make things better for our community. And so it's been really impressive to watch over the last few years. And the county as a whole has done a great job. And the access and functional needs area has also done a really good job.
And
That's great.
I mean, every year we get a little bit better, and it is just with and the more that we work together, the better it's going to be.
That's great. And then Paul, maybe could you say a little bit about what we've been doing at Human Services to contact our clients when we know one of these disasters is coming?
I can, and then I want to emphasize something that I already brought up.
Okay.
Working in government for a very long time, there's a responsibility that comes with that of ensuring everybody is safe. During disasters and during the power shutoffs, we've always had a role that we reach out to the individuals that are signed up in our programs to make sure that they have a plan and to make sure that they are safe anytime during a disaster. So those are things that we've worked very closely with the Emergency Operations Center to make sure that we have accurate lists of people who are impacted, and with PG&E in particular, knowing the area or the footprint that is going to be impacted. So that's an ongoing effort that we will continue to do. The one thing I wanted to go back to that I did mention, I just wanted to re-emphasize, that I tried to emphasize was, I said taking personal inventory about what your needs are in preparation for any disaster. And what I mean by that is it is not a weakness to rely on others during times of a disaster or when preparing for anything. I'm a man and I want to be strong and I want to be able to take care of myself and my family at all times. But sometimes I also need help, and to be able to know when to reach out. I think everybody should have somebody connected to them to help them with whatever plan they have. If I'm out of the area, I may need somebody to make sure that my family is safe. Or if I'm incapacitated for any reason, having backup plans that I can contact is just a safer way to live. It's not a weakness. The United States always uses independence, and that's not always the best approach. Interdependence. We are all dependent on each other at times in our life. So again, I just want to stress the importance of creating a plan that involves people.
That's great, Paul. There's actually another preparedness plan too in Spanish, and it's called Listos, which means ready in Spanish. And it's run by Catholic Charity. And they also do disaster preparedness training. So maybe Tracy can add that also to the chat. So you have the website. It's called Listos, and it's run by Catholic Charities. But one of the things you mentioned, Paul, yes.
I would love to add, our disaster preparedness workshop is also in Spanish. We do have Spanish literature, and absolutely.
Thank you, Lake. That's wonderful to know. That's great. I also want to mention that, whatever happened, it flew out of my head. So let me open it. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was going to say what Paul had just talked about, which is knowing people and having them help you, and not being such a hyper individualistic country, which we are, and it doesn't help us in disaster. But one of the things that this community has learned more than anything in all of our fires and our floods and COVID is how much we need each other. And I think when the fires diminish and when we find a vaccine for COVID, we will look back and say, we didn't know our neighbor before, now we do. And Now we're not afraid to ask for help, and emotional help and mental health assistance too. And I can't stress that enough, because that's every bit as important as all the practical stuff that we're talking about right now. So could one of you talk, or many of you talk about some of the community and neighborhood programs in terms of disaster preparedness and knowing your neighbors? You're muted, Lee. There you go.
So COAD is a great one for working with your, giving you some tips and stuff. Who else, Michael? We've got.
There's a couple of variations of neighborhood planning, and I do want to say too that that's really kind of critical. We've been talking about personal preparedness. Well, personal preparedness also includes kind of neighborhood planning as well, and making sure that you become familiar with who your neighbors are and begin to become acquainted with what you're doing, inventory of who is in your community. Know if there are nurses or doctors or any other emergency help in your area. And so, I know, for instance, that two of the people across the street from me are nurses, which is really important for me and my needs, just in the event of anything. So do take an inventory. It's good to develop a neighborhood plan if you can. There's one referred to as COPE that exists in the city of Santa Rosa. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Nancy might have it on the
Yeah,
tip of
Nancy
her
might
tongue. And that's kind of Nancy's wheelhouse too. But anyways, there's variations of the COPE program. Yeah, that's really an important function. And more communities are, promoting the kind of neighborhood community planning.
I remember during the Tubbs and the Nun fire, my neighborhood had a voluntary, very close to mandatory evacuation. And my neighbors all called me to see if I was okay, because they thought, okay, well, you're not going to be able to evacuate, are you, Shirley? You got a job to do. And we're all evacuating. So we want to know how we can help you, what we can do. And I think for the first time, I got that sense of, wow, it's so important to know people who live in your neighborhood. And since we have a fastly aging population here in Sonoma County, there's seniors in everybody's neighborhood. So reach out to people who might need that extra help, and people who are disabled, and people with kids and animals, whatever. We all need to jump in there and help each other. And I will tell you, the reason why we didn't lose a lot more lives with the Tubbs and Nun fires back in 2017 had to do with neighbors. Neighbors, literally waking their next door neighbor up at night, literally putting themselves in precarious situations. One of my friends, Brad Sherwood, had to went back to his community to make sure that his elderly neighbor who lived across the street, that she was able to get out safely. There were just so many stories like that people really rise to the occasion. And so we want to try and give you that balance, right? We want to say, yes, you need to be prepared. You need to be prepared. You need to be prepared and have a plan. But at the same time, know that sometimes those plans don't always happen. Sometimes additional complexities happen and disasters. And that's why we have to depend upon one another, as Paul had stated. What about seniors? This is more of a general question, and so any of you can answer this. And the question that came in was, what about low-income seniors that really need some case management help? Where can they go to get that?
565 info 4636. It's an information line for anybody to call to try to find out any questions about aging.
Even if they're low income, they can get help.
Absolutely.
We also have the AAA, Area Agency on Aging. I believe they offer some case management as well.
Yes, Paul runs that division actually. So we do have
a phone number you just gave.
Yeah, that's why he keeps.
Okay.
The 565 info is the gateway for many of those programs. So depending on what somebody may need, it could be for case management, it could be for financial consulting, multiple levels of things, but they would be the gateway to get to many of the programs. It may not be in-house government programs. We're connected to all of our providers in the community.
That's right. And Paul and I have actually been meeting with those providers every week since COVID started to provide assistance and to provide better services to our seniors and disabled community in this time of COVID. I will say that the meals programs offer a really good gateway also for assistance. And again, those are programs that you don't, that welcome donations, but if you can't afford to pay anything, and you are an older adult on a low fixed income, you absolutely and qualify for those meals. And you can call the Meals on Wheels at the Council on Aging or at Petaluma People Services. There are other meals programs too that are more specialized. And we have the Redwood Food Bank also that will help people get on the SNAP program or the food program. That we provide through the county. So there's lots and lots of eligibility programs that you may actually qualify for and you don't know. So be sure and call that information and assistance line that Paul just gave out. What about other things that seniors and disabled might need to get together in terms of medication or medical supplies in a disaster? What can you say about that?
Well, again, it's part of that, personal plan, making sure that you have an inventory. Your health information, sheet should have all your medications listed on it with the prescription numbers, et cetera. So that needs to be part of your plan. Should also include any kind of, equipment needs that you have or that you rely on. And so that's, again, an important piece of that planning process.
And I would also add that during the wildfires, I was reminded that I needed to look in my go bag and make sure that I had a week's worth of prescription medication. I can't emphasize that enough because if you end up in an evacuation center, or even if you're out of the county, or you end up with a hotel voucher or whatever with friends, you need to have that medication. Especially if you are in a highly dangerous zone, because you're not going to be able to necessarily get back until it's safe, and that may be days. So have at least a week worth of prescription drugs in your go bag.
Another thing that would be helpful if you're older and you use eyeglasses, magnification eyeglasses, have an extra pair in your go bag. If you use hearing aids, have an extra pair in your go bag. One of the things we provided during this last glass fire, there was an elderly lady at the Santa Rosa Vets that needed some hearing aids, and we worked with the county, the COAD in Sonoma, here in Sonoma County, and made arrangements to purchase some hearing aids for a lady there. But those are simple things that you could take care of in advance, and be helpful to do that.
Sure. And in addition, you should have that list of medications either written out or photograph with your phone, or have it on a little drive stick.
Yeah, putting it, taking photos is a really good idea, because sometimes the names of the medications are so incredibly long, or you lose the piece of paper. So just get out the meds tonight, put them in a line, and take a few photos so you have them with you. I will tell you, during those first fires, when we had literally thousands of people in evacuation centers, one of the number one issues that we worked on was getting people's prescription drugs filled, because people had to leave so fast that they didn't have them. So, and sometimes it took difficulty, with doctor prescriptions, and then the pharmacies getting hooked up with the evacuation centers. So really important to have that. So we're getting close to the 7 o'clock hour to finishing. And I just really want to give all of you an opportunity to kind of have a closing statement about how we can best assist people who are seniors and disabled in evacuation situations. Although I had one other question that Tracy just sent me that I did want to throw out, and I think we have the time. The question was that sometimes the Hispanic and Native American cultures don't feel welcome or safe going to shelters or evacuation sites. How is this going to be handled in the future?
Yeah, good question. Over the last couple of years, there's been more and more work put on this particular area. I know that within the Human Services Department, part of our planning includes making sure that the shelter teams that go out to the sites include a significant number of bilingual staff, so that we have Spanish-speaking folks available at the shelters. I know when I did the FAST training, we had 50% of our FAST people were bilingual. I think they're trying to address that even in the food area, although that's difficult. So more and more work is being done on trying to make it more welcoming, and I know that that's part of the training process with the Human Services Department as well.
Mm-hmm. And I might add that in the past we've had more of the Red Cross run our shelters, and now the county is running more and more operations with the assistance of the Red Cross of our shelters, so we can provide some more of that specialized services. So Paul, might you also answer this question, since your incredible staff have been running these shelters?
Yes, so they are incredible staff, and we connect with other organizations to come in when it's something that we think additional services are necessary. During this last round, actually both rounds, we brought in service providers from different organizations who we thought that had a special touch of something that they could provide to people who were there to make them feel more comfortable, because we are aware that not everybody wants to come to our shelters. But just for one example, the Latino Service Providers was an organization that had quite the showing during this glass fire, and other organizations as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think we've worked really hard. We actually have now an equity officer who's also Mexican American at our county, and she's developing all kinds of policies so that we can make sure that we are diverse and take in consideration of different cultures, especially in times of disaster. And again, I always go out to the evacuation sites. I spend most of my time there during these crises, because I think that that's a best way for me to spend my time, is to say, what are the needs of our seniors, our disabled, our Latino, our Native American communities. And I can tell you, going back 3 years, we've made huge leaps in providing those services. And I want to remind everybody too, if you are Latino and you're undocumented, you are 100% safe at our evacuation centers, 100% safe. You don't have to worry about your documentation. You will always be safe, and you will always be protected. And our number one purpose in human services is to provide those services, period. And you will always be safe. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes, and I want to let each one of you be able to wrap up with some closing statements. And let's see, I will start with April.
Well, I wanted to finish off with what you were just speaking about as well. We also had, towards the end of the glass fire, we connected with the Latino community to, they would call and speak to me directly, and then I would send out a bilingual driver to assist with people in need for that as well. So we do have bilingual drivers right now. We're still working on staff, but we do have the drivers to help out.
That's great.
On
That's
that area.
All right, great. And Mike, closing statements?
Sure, thanks, Shirley. Shirley, first of all, thank you so much for hosting this event tonight. It's been a pleasure to be a part of it, and really glad that the word's getting out there. Part of the reason that, I like to do this work and promote the need for people to plan in advance, particularly people with access and functional needs, is that I think everyone around this table or involved in this panel know that people with disabilities and older adults are disproportionately impacted by disasters and are usually the most vulnerable. And so it's really, really critical that, we do take special measures to make sure that we have those plans in place and are prepared for the event that anything comes our way. I'm certainly glad that we're beyond the fire season, and but we need to get ready for the flood season now. So do kind of take a look at your plan and get ready for the next event in case it does come.
That's great. Thanks so much, Mike. Paul?
I was trying to guess which order you were going to pick me. So I already said it. The call to actions that I have is prepare your own emergency plan with as many contingencies as you can possibly devote time to doing. So that's one. The second one is, if you're already responsible for the safety of somebody else, please make sure that they have an emergency plan and that you both know exactly what it is that's in that plan. The third one is be that plan for somebody else if you're not already connected to somebody. And that can take many different shapes and forms. Know who's in your neighborhood. Mike brought that up. Connect with somebody who may need some help, that person who may not ask for help every day, but be that plan for somebody if you can. And thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Paul. And yes, something I think you said, Mike, earlier about that disabled and seniors are often the most adversely affected by disasters. And we haven't lost people in, I think, the last 2 wildfires, but in the Tubbs fire and Nuns fire, we lost 24 people. And the majority of those people were seniors and disabled who were not able to evacuate in time. So we know that we want to focus especially on these populations to make sure that everybody's safe. And Lake, closing comments?
So thank you, Supervisor Zane. This is very important. People with disabilities and our elders are the ones most impacted detrimentally by these events. And again, I think making your plan, I really want to stress the importance of that, and learning about what's available out in the community, asking for help, reaching out to your neighbors. I know for some people this is really tough, but I really encourage that, because as a community, that's what gets us through these things. And we do have a great community. So please utilize the services that are out there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And then kind of my final comments is that there's a lot of information about disaster preparedness, everything from what do you do to prepare your animals to evacuate, to what phone numbers should you have, what you should have in terms of medical equipment and medical services. And all of that actually is being constantly accumulated with questions and answers on our website, which is socoemergency.org. And I believe Paul put that into the chat. And again, you'll go down a few rabbit holes if you go on that page, because there's a lot of information. So I'm pretty sure that if you have a question that hasn't been answered tonight, you will get it answered, and you will get those phone numbers and information that you need. But if you don't, Paul put up the information and assistance line. Mike and Lake and April, they put up phone numbers too for their services. And we want you to call us. We want you to reach out. We want you to be ready. Because when we're all ready, what it does in the end is that it protects our neighbor as well. And I think we saw that, especially in the Kincaid fire, when we evacuated literally half this county. Almost 200,000 people, just so that we could be safe, because it looked like the fires were going to wipe out the cities of Hillsburg and Windsor. And thank God that didn't happen, but we were ready, and the firefighters were able to fight the fire because we weren't in the way. So remember that it's not just about us, but it's also about protecting our neighbor and our community. I want to thank so much April, Mike, Lake, Paul. You guys are like experts in your field, and it's been so great to have you here with your knowledge. But I also want to thank my incredible staff, Tracy Cunha and Hannah Whitman, and thank our incredible translator, Jordy, and our incredible American Sign Language interpreter too, Naomi. And we'll do this again, but for now, stay safe. And remember, COVID is on the rise, so be really careful this holiday season. Thank you.